Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel and to benhammond.org. Today, I just want to take a few minutes and talk about my book that, if you follow my channel at all, you know I'm coming out with it soon. It's called An Inevitable Collision: How to Prepare Your Church for the Clash of Morality and a Gender-Confused Culture. And I just want to give you a little bit of information about this. I plan to have it out probably in the next week or two, so some of you may actually be watching this video after it's already out, so I'd encourage you to get it. And the idea of the book is to help churches prepare for this onslaught that we have from an immoral culture around us, immoral compared obviously to the Bible. The first chapter in the book, I just want to talk about this a little bit today because it sets up a little bit what the need is for this. And it's called Houston, We've Had a Problem. Now, you've probably heard that phrase before. It comes from the doomed, or the failed anyway, Apollo 13 mission in 1970. Something had gone terribly wrong. And so they radioed back, Houston, we've had a problem. If they didn't fix something and they didn't fix it right now, then the lives would be lost and the whole thing would be a failure. Well, I think about our society today, especially here in America, is what I'm thinking about. And I understand that we are in a problem. We have a huge problem in our society. And if we don't do something about it right now, we are going to be in big trouble as Christians and as a church. So we face some huge problems in our society. And one of them that really sticks out in our past is the Roe Vs Wade decision of 1973, where the Supreme Court sided with the idea of abortion, which, if you're a Christian, you probably understand that this is taking of an innocent life of someone who is made in the image of God. And so this is a sin and it's wrong and we should stand against it. But our Supreme Court said basically, to a degree, yeah, it's okay, at least at a certain point. And so this was a really big deal. Well, back in 2015, we had another case that was kind of just a huge situation that changed our society, or at least changed the obvious trajectory of our society. And that was Obergefell versus Hodges. And about that time, I was working on my doctoral dissertation and trying to decide what our church is supposed to do as we face this gender-confused culture that we're in. And that's what my dissertation was about. And part of that dissertation is now in this book. And that's what I want you to have, because I give practical ideas about what we can actually do to help out, to help our churches face this kind of thing that is all around us. And so the idea of Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015 was that plaintiffs from several states that had laws outlawing homosexual marriage, they sued for the right to be married. And of course, the Supreme Court went along with it in a 5-4 split, and basically striking down the laws that these states had against gay marriage. And what happened there was it actually then was an attack on religious liberty. As a matter of fact, Chief Justice John Roberts, who has not got everything right, but in this case he did, he wrote a very passionate dissent. And I would encourage you to read the whole response on this and all the dissents. He described that one of the problems with the majority opinion was that it used terms like teach and advocate. In other words, it said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and let the people who do not agree with homosexual marriage teach and advocate about it. That's fine. But Justice Roberts pointed out that's not what our First Amendment says. It doesn't say that you can go ahead and teach, you can advocate, but it uses a specific term, exercise. You need to be able to exercise your right. And so basically what you look at in Obergefell versus Hodges is, okay, you Christians and churches who don't believe in it, you can go ahead and teach against homosexual marriage. You can go ahead and talk about, these kind of things, but you can't act on it. You can't act on it. And that is very serious, because it doesn't do any good just to talk about something when you can't act on it. As a matter of fact, Solicitor General Donald Verrilli, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, if you read the proceedings of what happened here, he argued that if the court would rule in the favor that it did of in Obergefell versus Hodges, that he mentioned that the tax-exempt status of some religious institutions could be in jeopardy. And specifically, he mentioned two places. One he mentioned was a religious college that provides housing only for opposite-sex married couples. He said this could be a problem. And it could be. He mentioned adoption agencies that refuse to place children in the homes of same-sex couples. So he was foreseeing the problem if the court would go the way that it actually did. And Justice Samuel Alito, he had his own dissent. Everybody wrote their own dissents, right? Because this was such a big deal. He wrote in his own dissent that he that he warned that the ruling could be used to, quote, vilify Americans who are unwilling to assent to the new orthodoxy. In other words, he says, if people don't buy into this new orthodoxy, this new way of living, it would vilify them, basically the Christians. It would vilify the Christians for not believing that the way that society is telling us that we need to believe. And he said these people who stand against things like homosexual marriage will have to, quote, whisper their thoughts in the recesses of their homes. Because if they say them out in public, they're going to be slandered and they're going to lose their jobs. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we see happening around us. But you say, wait a minute, come on, really? This is America. These kind of things can't happen. If you've watched the news at all in the last several years, you know that this kind of thing is happening all the time. I'm going to share with you just real quickly about some of the major things that have happened of people that are being persecuted for just trying to do what's right. And I wrote about them in the book, but you can read this all over the news. In 2015, Memories Pizza, maybe you've heard about that, in Walkerton, which is close to where we were living at the time. Little tiny town, little tiny pizza place. Somebody from South Bend, north of them, came in, a reporter, knowing what they would say, and asked if they would, hypothetically, cater a gay wedding. And the owner said no. And this is a quote. He said, if a gay couple came in and wanted us to provide pizzas for their wedding, we would have to say no. Simple answer. No, we're not going to. He didn't say we wouldn't serve homosexual people. That would be discrimination. He says we cannot contribute to this act of wrong. And there's a big difference that many people don't understand. And of course, a firestorm of anger lit off. Death threats, people threatened to burn down his building. And for a while, the owners had to temporarily close the doors. Matter of fact, we just drove a couple weeks ago. We drove right by it, and I guess they're out of business now, and I think there's some other pizza place in there. But these people experienced a lot of persecution. They were known nationwide just because they hypothetically said, no, we can't support a gay wedding, and that's all it was. So maybe you've heard of Barronelle Stutzman. It's 2013. She had a couple of friends who happened to be gay. She was in Washington, and they told her they decided they want to be married. And she was friends with them, and she said, look, you guys need to understand that because I have a relationship with Jesus Christ, I cannot put flowers together for your wedding. And because of that, she was sued, and saying that her actions violated the Washington law against discrimination. And she had to fight many legal battles since then. Obviously, Jack Phillips, he's one of the big names that we hear about now. He owns Masterpiece Cake Shop in Lakewood, Colorado. And he was also asked to make a cake for a gay wedding back in 2012. The Colorado Civil Rights Commission ruled that he was guilty of discrimination just because he wouldn't make this cake. Now, he would sell to anyone. He would make a cake for gay people. He would sell anything that he had for gay people, but he would not make a cake for a gay wedding because he felt that that would be a way of him condoning this, which would be, he said, no, I can't do that because that would be, I shouldn't have to do it because I want to exercise my right of religious liberty. Okay, that's what was going on here. And so he had all this, and he's fought legal battle after legal battle. People have shown up and, kept putting him to the test. I mean, this poor guy has just barely been through it just simply because he said, I want to stand up and do what's right. I cannot support a gay wedding because it's wrong. After all, do I not have the First Amendment right to exercise my freedom of religion? Well, that's exactly what they said in the court hearings for it. Look, if we pass this, it'll be saying, oh, you can teach it, you can say whatever you want, but you can't exercise anything about it. So Jack Phillips, if you want to talk about how you don't believe in gay marriage, that's fine, but you better make a cake for one. See, it doesn't make any sense. This is America. We're supposed to have this freedom of religion. We're not supposed to be forced to do something that we think is wrong. And there's other examples. Hands-On Originals, a promotional printing company, they refused to design and print a t-shirt for a gay pride parade. The same thing happened to them. Eventually, the courts ruled in their favor, but they lost some big customers because of it. The list goes on. Duck Dynasty. Remember Phil Robertson being canned from Duck Dynasty. And of course, he got his job back before the whole show went out. But he was just stating his opinion on the matter. Kelvin Cochran. Maybe you haven't heard of Kelvin Cochran. He was the police chief of Atlanta. And he lost his job in 2015 because he published a book that had what was, quote, anti-gay language. He lost his job for that. By the way, it's interesting to note that he's also black. And so in this case, it seemed like buying into the social norm defeated the whole racism thing. So you don't know where society's going to be, right? It's crazy to figure out, well, what are we supposed to think? Kim Davis, the county clerk in Rowan County, Kentucky, refused to issue same-sex marriages after the Obergefell decision, and she was put in jail for it. I mean, the list just goes on and on of all kinds of things. But what I'm really concerned about is churches. What is going to happen in churches when churches and pastors stand up and try to preach the truth and try to stand up for the truth and have pretty much limits on who can actually come and work in a church, who can actually join a church. With a ruling such as Obergefell, we could be in trouble. It's like putting a target. I'm going to stand for the truth, so I'm putting a target on myself. And I think it's so important for us to make sure we stress that we do not discriminate against gay people. Anyone is welcome to come into our services and watch. But there are rules, because this is a sin, a blatant public sin that is going on. And we can't allow that to come and join our church or anything like that, or work with the ministry, just like there's other things we wouldn't allow people to do. Other sins also, they wouldn't allow them to come join the church or whatever because of that. And so this is really touching the church, and we have to be ready for it, which is what the book is about. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've studied a lot of things, and I think maybe it can help you a little bit as you try to work through what you have to do in your church. But to take it one step further, we have this whole gender debate. People don't even understand, it seems like anymore today, what their gender is. We have a term called gender identity. You can basically choose what your gender is going to be. We used to have these phrases, if a child was born, a doctor would look at the child and observe what the sex is, right? It's, oh, that's a boy or that's a girl. That it's pretty simple. But today the term that's being used is assign, where a doctor will assign a gender to a baby. I will assign male or female to that baby, and then later on they can decide what they actually want to be. I mean, how do we get to that point where gender is no longer something that you observe and not something you choose? It's just who God made you to be. We've fallen so far away from common sense and away from truth. And I think the problem is that we have lost our navigation system. We've lost our morals. And so part of this book is about morals. How do we get our morals? How do we know what's true? Where does truth come from? Obviously, this is a huge discussion, and so I couldn't put it all in the book, but just enough to help us to understand that there are morals and they come from God. The cure for all this is we have to understand that God is our source of morality. What he says is what we need to listen to. So that's basically it for today. Thanks for watching, you guys, and I hope that you get the book and read it. Give it to your pastor if he doesn't already have it. God bless. I'll see you next time.